Peyton Vance stepped off the tiny seaplane with her designer duffel bag slung over her shoulder, sunglasses hiding the exhaustion in her eyes, and a storm of chaos left behind in Manhattan. 3 days ago, she'd walked out of a boardroom mid-meeting, tossed her phone into the East River, and told her assistant to cancel everything. After 10 years of clawing her way to the top of Vance Tech, after surviving a public breakup with a hedge fund golden boy who cheated on her with his assistant, after facing a media circus that tore her apart, she was done. No press, no noise, no city. Miles of ocean, no cell service. Zero paparazzi, the pilot had said when she asked for the most isolated place he could fly her to. Welcome to Havens Point. Population, barely anyone. The salty breeze hit her first, then the quiet, real quiet, no horns, no phones, just wind, waves, and birds, and then him. He was standing at the dock as if he'd been waiting for her, though his expression said he wasn't expecting company at all. A man in worn jeans, a white t-shirt damp with sweat, and fishing boots, broad shoulders, sun-kissed skin, and a little boy hiding behind his leg. The man looked at her like she'd just fallen out of the sky, which technically she had. "You lost?" he asked, his voice deep and low, the kind that made people pause without knowing why. Peyton took off her sunglasses and looked right at him. "No. I'm exactly where I want to be." His brows lifted a little like he didn't believe her. "Not many people end up here on purpose. I'm not most people." He looked her over again, eyes catching on her high-end sneakers and the leather bag that probably cost more than his boat. He didn't say anything about it, but she saw it in his face. "I'm Quinn Sawyer," he finally said, jerking his chin toward the boy. "That's my son, Finn. This is our doc." Finn peeked out from behind his father's leg, his curly hair a mess and his hands sticky with something orange. "Hi," Peyton said, softening her voice. She crouched. "I like your shirt." It had a shark on it and a ketchup stain. Finn grinned, then wiped his hand on his shorts. "You're really tall." "I'm wearing platform sneakers," she whispered. Quinn's mouth twitched. "You here to rent a place or just sightseeing?" "I booked a house through a private agency, something about a lighthouse view." She pulled a crumpled sheet from her pocket and offered it. He glanced at it. "That's my neighbor's place. I'll take you there." He looked at her bag again. "You got more luggage. This is it." He blinked. "That all?" She nodded once. "I came to disappear, not move in." He didn't ask more, just gestured toward his boat. "Hop on." The boat was old but well kept, with a wooden bench and a cooler shoved in the corner. Peyton's hair whipped around her face as they sped across the water, the island shrinking behind them. "You fish for a living," she yelled over the wind. Quinn nodded. "Crabs, lobster, whatever's biting, sell it to the mainland." "Is it just you and your son?" "Yup. Your wife, gone." Years ago. Peyton didn't ask more. She understood the weight of silence. When they docked again, the house was even more remote than she expected. Perched on a cliff, no neighbors in sight. It was beautiful weathered wood, big windows, and the sound of waves crashing below. Quinn helped her with her bag. "This place has no Wi-Fi, no cable, and one working landline for emergencies," he said. "You sure you'll survive?" "I'm not here to survive," she said. "I'm here to breathe." He looked at her for a second longer than he needed to. "If you need anything, we're just across the inlet. You'll see the dock lights at night." He turned to leave. "Wait," she called. "Thank you for not asking who I am." Quinn paused. "Does it matter?" Peyton smiled. "Not here, apparently." The first few days were quiet and strange. She cooked eggs that came from an actual chicken. She read a book. She learned how to light a fire without YouTube. And then, on the 4th day, she nearly chopped off her finger trying to open a coconut. Which is how Quinn ended up at her front door, Finn in tow, holding a first aid kit and a smirk. "You really tried to open it with a butter knife." "I panicked," she said, holding up her bandaged hand. "I was hungry. And I thought it would be easier." He stepped inside without asking, took her hand gently, and peeled back the paper towel. "Not deep," he murmured, "but you're lucky." Finn climbed onto her couch like he owned it. "You don't cook much, do you?" "Not unless boiling water counts." Quinn glanced around the kitchen. "You have a stove, but no food." "I didn't realize you had to bring your own groceries to a remote island. The agency said it was stocked." He gave her a look. "It means they left you a can of beans and half a bag of rice." "I noticed." He cleaned her cut, hands gentle but sure. You ever eat lobster fresh from the water? She shook her head. Come over tomorrow, I'll show you how to crack one. Finn'll show you how to eat it. I don't want to intrude. You won't. Are you always this helpful to lost women with bad survival instincts? No, he said, voice low. Just the ones who look like they haven't breathed in a long time. Peyton swallowed hard. She didn't remember the last time someone looked at her like they weren't calculating what she could do for them, like they actually saw her, and God help her she didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not when she was starting to remember how it felt to want something just because it felt good. Not when there was a quiet fisherman with warm hands and a sad smile who had just invited her into his world, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not when her heart, for the first time in years, had started to beat for something that wasn't ambition. She looked at Quinn, and she said, okay. The next morning, Peyton woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below and the faint cries of seagulls circling overhead. Her wrist still ached slightly from the makeshift bandage, but her stomach growled louder than the pain. She remembered Quinn's invitation, and for the first time in weeks, felt a flicker of anticipation that wasn't tied to deadlines or damage control. She threw on the softest thing she'd packed, an old linen shirt that used to belong to her brother, and tied her hair up in a haphazard knot. No makeup. No pretense. She didn't even look in the mirror before slipping out the door. The walk to Quinn's place took longer than she expected. The trail was uneven and overgrown in places, twisting through dense trees and wildflowers. By the time she reached his dock, her shoes were damp from morning dew, and her legs ached from the incline. But when she saw the small house nestled near the water's edge, with smoke curling from the chimney and the scent of butter and sea salt in the air, every step felt worth it. Quinn was outside splitting logs, his back to her. The movement was clean, practiced, necessary. Peyton stopped for a moment to watch, a strange warmth stirring in her chest. This wasn't the kind of man who bought his way through problems. He built things, fixed things, lived deliberately. You're early, he said without turning around. How'd you know I was standing here? You've got a city walk. Fast and unsure, she stepped closer. I wasn't sure you'd actually meant the invitation. He set the axe aside and turned to her. I don't say things I don't mean. Finn came bounding from around the corner, his curls sticking up in random directions and a jelly stain across one cheek. We're making lobster rolls, but Dad says you probably won't know how to eat them. Peyton raised an eyebrow. Is that a challenge? Quinn nodded toward the porch. Let's find out. Inside, the house was smaller than she'd imagined, but filled with sunlight and the scent of rosemary. A pot simmered on the stove, and a worn wooden table in the corner was topped with a bowl of lemons and a stack of mismatched plates. Do you cook a lot? She asked, watching him pull fresh rolls from the oven, often enough. Finn's got an appetite, and the store's a half-day trip by boat. She leaned against the counter. So everything here is made from scratch, pretty much, except the ketchup. He'd mutiny without it. Finn nodded solemnly. Ketchup is non-negotiable. They ate outside, perched on overturned crates and a weathered bench, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. The lobster was warm, buttery, and messy. She dripped sauce on her shirt and laughed when Finn offered her a napkin that had been used at least twice already. You ever think about leaving? She asked Quinn once Finn ran off to chase a crab near the rocks. He took a sip of water. Sometimes, especially in winter. But then spring comes and I remember why I stay. You don't miss more? He looked at her, really looked. More of what? Noise, movement, big things happening. No, I've had enough of all that. I used to work on a commercial rig in the Keys. Big operation, bigger pressure. I was gone for weeks at a time, missed most of Finn's firsts. One day I just didn't get back on the boat. Was that after his mom left? She left before he turned 2, said she wasn't meant for small towns or small lives, took off and never came back. Peyton didn't speak for a long moment. Then she must have been out of her mind. He didn't react the way she expected. No bitterness, no anger, just a slow exhale. Maybe she knew herself better than I gave her credit for. Peyton turned her gaze to the horizon. I think I forgot how to know myself. He didn't push. Just let the silence stretch between them like a thread, taut and waiting. After a while, he stood. You want to see something? She followed him down the rocky path to a small cove hidden between two cliffs. The water here was calmer, clearer, and the air smelled like mint and salt. A tiny rowboat bobbed near the shore. "We come here when things get heavy," he said. "Finn calls it the world's quietest place." She crouched beside the water, trailing her fingers through it. "You bring a lot of strangers here. You're not a stranger anymore." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Why are you being so kind to me?" He tilted his head. "Because you look like you don't remember what kindness feels like." That night back at the lighthouse house, Peyton couldn't sleep. Not because she was anxious or haunted by headlines, but because her mind kept returning to the way Quinn's voice softened when he spoke about his son. The way he'd handed her the better half of his role without hesitation. The way he hadn't once asked what she was running from. She stepped outside barefoot, the deck cool beneath her feet. The stars were brighter here, wilder. She leaned on the railing and closed her eyes. "What the hell am I doing?" she whispered to the wind. But the question didn't scare her the way it used to. Because for the first time in years, she didn't need to know the answer right away. The next morning, she found a crate on her porch. Inside were fresh eggs, a jar of honey, and a folded note on plain white paper. It said only 2 words for breathing. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but she didn't need to. She already knew. 3 weeks passed before Peyton realized she hadn't checked a single news alert. The mornings had become a rhythm bare feet on cold floorboards, coffee brewed in a dented percolator, and the sound of Finn's laughter drifting in from across the inlet. Her phone remained dead in a drawer, and she hadn't once missed it. One afternoon, she was hauling a crate of driftwood up from the shore when she heard footsteps behind her. "You planning to build a fortress or something?" Peyton turned to find Quinn holding a coil of rope over his shoulder, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. Sunlight glinted off the salt in his hair. "I read somewhere that keeping busy helps keep the mind clear," she said, brushing sand from her hands. He stepped beside her, eyeing the wood. "That or you're trying to avoid something," she exhaled. "Maybe both." He crouched beside the crate, picking up a piece of driftwood with a knot that looked vaguely like a heart. "You always run when things get too loud." "I didn't run," she said. "I walked, very deliberately." He stood, tossing the wood back in. "Fair enough. But the way I see it, you're still hiding." Peyton crossed her arms. "You don't know what I'm hiding from." "Then tell me." She hesitated. No one had asked, not really. They'd speculated, blogged, whispered, but no one had looked her in the eye and said, "Speak." "I built a company from the ground up. I gave it everything, and when it started to work, when it really took off, people stopped seeing me. They only saw the name. The brand, the woman who could open doors." Quinn waited. "I hired a man I trusted. He was smart, connected. We dated for a while. Nothing serious, or so I thought. Then he tried to take my company from me. Quietly through loopholes, bored Vote's charm. I caught it just in time, but the damage was done. The press turned it into a circus. Suddenly, I wasn't a visionary. I was a woman who got duped." Quinn's jaw tightened. "You fire him, publicly, and I cut ties with anyone who sided with him, which was half the board." "Good." She looked at him, surprised. "You did what was right, even if it cost you. It cost everything. Investors, reputation, friends. My name became synonymous with drama instead of innovation." Quinn stepped closer, his voice low. "Then maybe it's time to stop rebuilding what broke you." She blinked. "What does that even mean?" "Maybe you're not supposed to go back. I can't just disappear." "Why not?" "Because I built something. I earned it." He didn't argue. He just studied her like he was trying to read between the lines. Finn's voice called out from the path, and Quinn turned, his tone shifting instantly. "Stay where I can see you." Peyton watched him jog off, and something inside her softened. The way he moved, protective, instinctual, made her chest ache with something she couldn't name yet. Later that evening, she found herself on his porch again. This time, she'd brought something, a half-empty bottle of wine and 2 glasses she'd found in a forgotten cabinet. "Peace offering," she said when he opened the door. "For what?" "For unloading my neuroses on you this afternoon." He stepped aside, letting her in. "I've had worse conversations." They sat on the porch, the wine between them, the stars above. Finn was already asleep, his bedroom window cracked slightly to let in the breeze. "You always wanted this life?" she asked. "Not at first. I thought I needed the kind of success that left a mark. Big earnings, big deals." What changed? My brother died. Car accident. He was 34, had 2 kids and a wife he barely saw. I flew up for the funeral and realized his daughter didn't even recognize me. Peyton didn't speak. I quit the next week, bought this house sight unseen, figured I'd learn to live small or drown trying. And did you? Drown. He tipped his head toward the water. Almost. But then Finn learned to walk barefoot across the dock, and I started remembering what mattered. She turned the glass in her hands. You talk about him like he saved you. He did. The silence stretched again, but this time it was filled with something warmer, something unspoken. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said earlier, about not going back. He waited. If I don't go back, what do I do? Who am I without the company? He leaned back in his chair. Maybe you get to find out. The next morning, a knock on her door startled her out of a half-sleep. She opened it to find Finn holding a small tackle box and a serious expression. Dad says if you're serious about learning, you gotta start early. She blinked. Learning what? Fishing. Peyton looked past him to where Quinn stood at the end of the dock, already loading gear onto the boat. I don't know the first thing about, neither did I, Finn interrupted, but I'm awesome now. She laughed, pulling on a hoodie and lacing up her boots. The boat rocked gently as she stepped in, Quinn handing her a rod with a quiet, "Don't drop it." I won't, he met her eyes. Good. Because once the line's in, you don't let go. They moved across the water, the island shrinking behind them. Peyton sat beside Finn, the wind tangling in her hair, the salt air sharp in her lungs. She felt something shift then. Not a decision, not yet, but something inside her was loosening. Breaking apart and rearranging. She looked at Quinn, his hands steady on the wheel, the sunrise catching the edge of his profile. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to be anywhere else. The storm rolled in 3 days after the fishing trip. It wasn't the kind of storm that passed quickly. It lingered, loud and unrelenting, thrashing the shoreline and flooding the narrow trail between Peyton's cottage and Quinn's dock. The wind howled through the trees like a warning, and the sea turned dark and wild. Most of the island hunkered down for it. Peyton stayed inside, candles lit, windows latched. She kept an eye on the water through the largest window, heart thudding with a strange ache she didn't know what to do with. She hadn't seen Quinn or Finn since the skies turned, and the quiet felt heavier now. Not peaceful. Hollow. She was curled on the couch with a book she couldn't focus on when a knock startled her upright. When she opened the door, Quinn was soaked to the bone, hair dripping into his eyes, holding a folded tarp under one arm. Your chimney's smoking wrong. Wind's pushing it back in. You'll start coughing on fumes if you don't fix it. She stepped back without a word and let him in. He dropped the tarp by the door and pulled his jacket off, water pooling at his feet. Peyton grabbed a towel from the linen shelf and handed it over. I didn't even notice the smoke. You wouldn't. You're used to central heating and carbon monoxide detectors. She folded her arms. You didn't come just for that. No, he admitted. Finn's at Mrs. Corbin's. Her place sits higher, less flood risk. She insists on keeping him during storms so he doesn't sleep through a wall falling in. Peyton's brow lifted. You let him stay somewhere else. She's 80 and doesn't own a phone. He thinks it's an adventure. She smiled faintly, then nodded toward the couch. Sit. You look like you walked through a hurricane. I did. He sat. Peyton sat across from him, her fingers tangling nervously. I've been thinking about leaving. Quinn's expression didn't change. I haven't decided, she added quickly, but I've been thinking about it. Because the quiet's worn off. Because people don't just disappear, Quinn. At some point, I have to face the world again. I never said you shouldn't, but you want me to stay. He didn't answer right away. Then, yes, that's not fair, I know. I have a company that needs me. You have people who tried to dismantle it when they thought you weren't watching. Her voice dropped. And I still built it. I still care. I'm not asking you to stop caring, he said. I'm asking you to consider if what you built is still worth carrying. She looked down at her hands. I don't want to go back to who I was, she whispered, but I don't know who I am without her. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're someone who didn't scream when she hooked a sea base, who learned how to gut a crab without flinching, who made my kid laugh so hard he snorted lemonade through his nose. You're someone who hasn't looked at her reflection in weeks and still walks like she owns the ground under her feet. She looked up. You're not lost, Peyton. "You're just not finished." The silence between them was sharp with things neither had said. "I don't want to fall for you just to leave," she said. "Then don't leave." "It's not that simple." "It is," he said. "You stay, you build something here, something that doesn't hurt." Her throat worked. "And what about you? You're used to being alone." "I was surviving. Not living." "Quinn, I've watched you find pieces of yourself out here, pieces you didn't think you missed. Don't walk away from that, not when you've only just started." Tears welled, sudden and hot. "I'm scared." "So am I." The wind rattled the windows, and for once neither of them flinched. "You said once that Finn saved you," she said quietly. "Let me save you back." His voice was hoarse. "You already did." When the storm broke the next morning, the sun came back like forgiveness. Peyton walked the trail to Quinn's dock, her boots kicking up wet leaves. Finn was there, skipping rocks with a practiced flick of his wrist. "You're back," he grinned, running to her. "I never really left," he beamed. "Want to help me build the fort now that the storm's done?" "Absolutely." They spent the afternoon dragging driftwood and tying ropes between trees. Quinn joined them just before sunset, bringing lemonade and a crooked grin. Peyton looked up from where she crouched, hammering a stake into the dirt. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He held out a folded sheet of paper. "It's from Mrs. Corbin. She wants you to know there's a property for sale just down the ridge, Ocean View. Needs someone who doesn't mind fixing things." Peyton unfolded the paper and read the address, then looked back at him. "I don't know how to fix things." "You'd learn." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're asking me to stay. I'm asking you to choose this, not because it's easy, but because it's different, because it's real." She turned to Finn, who had already started building a flag from seaweed and an old sock, then back to Quinn, and for the first time in years, the choice felt clear. That night, she stood on the cliffside, the lights from Quinn's dock glowing in the distance. Her bare feet sank into the damp earth, and her heart beat steady in her chest. She didn't need the city's skyline to feel powerful. She didn't need a boardroom to feel seen. She only needed this. The next morning, she returned to Quinn's porch with a toolbox and a set of keys. "I bought the place," she said. He only said, "Good. You'll need this," and handed her a hammer with her initials carved into the handle. Finn appeared behind him, holding a notebook and a serious expression. "If you're going to live here, you need to know the rules." "Oh yeah," Peyton asked. 1. Don't feed the gulls. 2. Always leave cookies out during storms. And 3. He looked up at her. "Don't disappear again, okay?" Peyton crouched and wrapped him in a hug. "I won't." Quinn watched them, arms crossed, face unreadable. She stood and stepped closer to him. "I'm still scared," she said. "So am I," he replied. "Doesn't mean we shouldn't try." His hand brushed hers. "No. It doesn't." She leaned in and kissed him, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that rewrote endings. And when she pulled back, he didn't say anything. He just held her hand and didn't let go. The first morning in the new house smelled like cedar and sea air. Peyton stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the sun rise through the massive window that overlooked the cliffs. The place was modest, 2 bedrooms, an old clawfoot tub that needed refinishing, and a porch with loose boards, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she wasn't renting space in someone else's world. She was building her own. She hadn't touched a spreadsheet in over a month. Instead, her fingers were calloused from sanding cabinets and hauling lumber. The house had no internet yet, and she hadn't rushed to get it. She brewed coffee in a French press Quinn found at a yard sale and poured it into a chipped mug she'd grown to love. Finn arrived just after breakfast, carrying a fishing net and a list of important island facts he refused to reveal until she'd finished helping him fix the porch railing. He informed her with great seriousness that the house was haunted by a friendly ghost named Walter who only appeared during thunderstorms. Peyton promised to leave out oatmeal cookies just in case. Quinn showed up later with a box of tools and a bag of nails. He didn't knock. He never did anymore. "You're missing half a gutter," he said by way of greeting. "I was hoping you'd notice." He set the box down and gave the porch post a firm shake. "I brought extra brackets. You're going to need them." "I brought pie," she replied. "You're going to want that." They fell into the rhythm of repair without needing to talk about it. She held the beams steady while he drilled. He measured while she marked the wood with chalk. Finn danced around them with a hammer he wasn't technically allowed to use on anything that mattered. By late afternoon, the porch was stable, the gutters were hung, and Peyton had accumulated a splatter of white paint under her jaw. Quinn reached out and wiped it off with his thumb. "You're getting better at this," he said. "I might even start charging you next time you need help." He leaned in, brushing his lips over her temple. "You already cost me everything." She turned to face him. "Everything? My peace and quiet, my perfectly disorganized tool shed. My ability to walk across the island without wondering what you're thinking." She slid her arms around his waist. "You love it." He kissed her slowly, his hands settling on her hips like they belonged there. "Yeah. I really do." They stayed like that, wrapped in the scent of pine and salt and fresh paint, until Finn loudly announced he'd seen Walter in the bedroom and needed backup. Quinn went to investigate, and Peyton watched them disappear down the hall, laughing. The next week, she received a letter forwarded from Manhattan. It was from the board of Vance Tech. They were offering to buy out her remaining shares and name her as a permanent advisor remotely at her discretion. It was clean, final, and generous. She didn't hesitate. She signed the paperwork, mailed it back with a note that simply said, "I'm done chasing what doesn't want me." She didn't tell Quinn right away. Instead, she waited until they were on the water, fishing lines cast, the sky a tumble of gold and lavender. "I sold everything," she said. He reeled in slowly. "Everything? My shares, my stake. The name still exists, but I don't belong to it anymore." He looked at her for a long moment. "You sure? I've never been more sure of anything." He set his rod down. "So what now?" She smiled. "Now I figure out what I want. And who I want to be. Any early guesses?" "I want to teach Finn how to swim properly. I want to repaint my living room. I want to write something. Maybe a book. And I want to wake up next to you without wondering how long it'll last." He reached for her hand and kissed her knuckles one by one. "Then marry me," she blinked. "What?" Simple question, no fanfare, no ring yet, just me asking you to say yes, her heart thundered. "You're serious?" "I love you, Peyton, not who you were, not who you're going to be, just you, right now. And I want you in my life for every day after this one." She laughed, breathless. "You're not even nervous." "I am," he said. "But I've learned not to wait when something good finally finds you." She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He kissed her hard, the boat rocking beneath them, the lines forgotten. They didn't tell Finn until later that evening, over a dinner of fresh crab and bread still warm from the oven. He looked at them, wide-eyed, then grinned. "Does that mean I get a room at both houses?" "You already do," Peyton said, ruffling his hair. He nodded sagely. "Can I wear a cape to the wedding?" Quinn didn't even blink. "Only if I can wear one too." They married on the cliff behind Peyton's house, where the grass grew tall and the wind never stopped moving. The ceremony was small, just the islanders. Finn walking her down the makeshift aisle with a bouquet of sea lavender, and Quinn waiting barefoot under a wooden arch they built together. Peyton wore a simple white dress she found in a thrift store, and Quinn wore a shirt he'd patched 3 times and refused to replace. They exchanged vows they wrote themselves, no promises to obey or conform, only to show up, to stay when things got hard, and to keep choosing each other over and over again. Finn gave a speech about how he was happy they were in love, but also that they'd agreed to let him name the new puppy. Afterward, they danced under string lights and ate lemon cake made by Mrs. Corbin, who cried through the whole thing. The sky was clear, the ocean calm, and the stars came out like they were celebrating too. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Finn was asleep curled up between 2 dogs on the couch, Peyton stood on the porch with her arms around Quinn, her cheek resting against his chest. "This doesn't feel real," she whispered. "It's the most real thing I've ever had," he murmured. They stood in silence, listening to the waves, to the wind, to the steady beat of something neither of them had dared hope for. And when she looked up at him, her eyes full of everything they'd built and everything still to come, he kissed her like the future was already waiting. They didn't need a city skyline, they had each other, and that was more than enough.